The storm did not arrive like weather. It arrived like judgment. Above the barren world of Keeler, 9, the sky fractured into violent layers of violet and electric blue. Lightning did not strike downward. It crawled sideways, ripping through clouds as if searching for something to punish. The wind carried metallic dust and the bitter sting of ionized rain. A storm powerful enough to peel steel from bone. Everyone with sense had already disappeared underground. Everyone except Joran Val. Joran moved slowly across the open plain, his long coat snapping violently behind him. Each step was calculated. Scrap runners learned early that panic killed faster than hunger. His scanner flickered uselessly in his hand, numbers glitching as the storm's radiation overwhelmed it. Useless, he muttered, shoving it back into his belt. He should have turned back an hour ago. There was nothing left worth salvaging in the crash zone. Only twisted hulls from forgotten battles, and the ghosts of ships no one claimed anymore. But hunger made people stubborn, and Joran had not eaten properly in 3 days. A sudden thunderclap shook the ground beneath him. He staggered, catching himself just in time. Fine cracks spread across the stone at his feet, glowing faintly before sealing shut again. Keeler, 9 was alive in the wrong ways. Then he heard it. At first, Joran thought it was the wind. Storms played tricks on the ears. But this sound was different. Thin. Broken. Almost pleading. He stopped. The cry came again. Not human. Joran's jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away. The law was clear across all crown systems. No aid to non-registered species. No contact with alien refugees. Anyone caught helping was labeled a collaborator. Collaborators vanished. The cry came a third time, weaker now. Joran exhaled slowly and turned toward the sound. The ruins lay half buried in ash and twisted metal. A shuttle that had failed to outrun the storm. Its hull was split open like a wound, edges glowing faintly from recent impact. Inside, shadows moved. Joran climbed over fallen debris and peered in. That was when he saw her. She was small, curled beneath a fractured wing panel, her body trembling violently. Her skin shimmered with a soft silver sheen, not reflective like metal, but alive, almost breathing with light. Her hair was pale, nearly white, clinging to her face in damp strands. Her eyes were large, luminous, unfocused with fear. A child. An alien child. Joran's breath caught. Oh hell. She looked up at him, terror flooding her expression. Her mouth opened, and the cry escaped again. Raw and frightened. Weak lightning illuminated the interior of the wreck, freezing the moment like a painting. Joran raised his hands slowly, palms open. Easy, he said, forcing calm into his voice. I'm not Crown. I'm not anyone. The child didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Her cry softened into shallow, panicked breaths. She tried to pull herself back farther, only to gasp in pain as her body refused to cooperate. She was injured. Joran swore under his breath and glanced back at the sky. The storm was intensifying. Acid rain began to hiss against the hull, eating away at exposed metal. If he left her, she would be dead within minutes. If he helped her, he might not live much longer. He stepped closer. The child flinched, then collapsed fully, her strength giving out. Joran crouched beside her, scanning her quickly for visible wounds. Strange markings, bioluminescent lines, ran faintly along her arms and neck, pulsing erratically, like a failing heartbeat. Okay, he murmured, more to himself than to her. Okay, don't die. Please don't die. He shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her carefully. She was colder than she should have been. Too light, like she hadn't eaten in days. As he lifted her, her eyes fluttered open again. Her small hand reached out, fingers trembling, and latched onto his sleeve with surprising strength. She whispered something, one word, broken by exhaustion. Louis. Joran froze. Luis. Her eyes met his. She nodded faintly. That's your name, he asked quietly. Another weak nod. Well, he said, forcing a thin smile, you picked a terrible place to crash, Luis. He rose to his feet, bracing her against his chest as the storm slammed into him with renewed fury. The wind howled louder now, as if angered by his decision. Rain burned against his skin. His boots slipped as the ground turned slick beneath him. Every step away from the wreck felt heavier than the last. Behind him, the shuttle groaned and collapsed inward, swallowed by the storm. Joran didn't look back. Louise stirred in his arms, pressing closer instinctively. Her head rested against his chest, and for a brief moment, Joran felt her heartbeat, faint, fast, afraid. "Hold on," he whispered. "Just hold on." High above Keeler, 9, beyond the storm clouds and beyond mortal sight, sensors shifted. Energy patterns changed. In a silent chamber of glass and starlight, a figure stood watching the planet below. Ancient eyes followed the tiny heat signature moving through the storm. The man and the child, bound together by a single, impossible choice. The figure did not speak. He only watched. And far below, unaware of kings or destinies, Joran Val carried an alien orphan through a storm that should have killed them both, not knowing that every step he took was being measured, and that the fate of worlds had quietly begun to turn. Cloud with lightning sparkles, the tunnel mouth appeared like a wound in the earth, jagged, half-collapsed, and barely wide enough to promise safety. Joran Val stumbled toward it with the last of his strength, boots sliding over wet stone as the storm roared behind him like a living thing denied its prey. When he crossed the threshold, the wind screamed once more, then cut off abruptly. Silence followed. Joran collapsed to one knee, chest heaving, arms tightening instinctively around the small body he carried. His muscles trembled violently, not from exhaustion alone, but from the sudden absence of pressure. The storm had been pushing him forward, daring him to fail. Now that it was gone, his body finally understood how close he'd come to breaking. Louise stared. Her eyes opened slowly, glowing softly in the dim emergency lights flickering along the tunnel walls. She looked around, confused, then up at Joran's face. Rainwater dripped from his hair onto her forehead. "You stayed," she whispered. Joran swallowed hard. His throat burned from the storm, from shouting, from fear he hadn't allowed himself to feel yet. "Looks like it." He shifted, lowering himself fully to the ground and adjusting his hold, so she could sit more comfortably against his chest. She was still shivering, though the air here was warmer. The strange glowing lines along her skin pulsed unevenly, dimmer than before. "That's not good," Joran muttered. Louise followed his gaze to her own arms. She didn't seem alarmed. If anything, her expression was distant, thoughtful, like someone listening to a sound only they could hear. "The storm speaks," she said quietly. It was angry. Joran gave a tired, humorless laugh. "Storms are always angry on this planet." "No," she replied. "This one was watching." That made him pause. He shifted his grip, suddenly uncomfortable. "You shouldn't talk like that. People hear things in storms. Happens all the time." Louise looked at him with eyes far too old for a child. "It watched you." Joran stood abruptly, setting her down on a broken crate beside the tunnel wall. He stepped back half a pace, running a hand through his wet hair. "All right," he said carefully. "You're exhausted. Probably concussed. Let's focus on getting you food, yeah?" She didn't argue. Her eyelids drooped, her strength fading again. Joran cursed himself for wasting time. He searched his pack quickly. Half a ration bar. A cracked water capsule. A thermal patch meant for muscle injuries. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. He knelt in front of her, breaking the ration into smaller pieces and offering one gently. She sniffed it, curious, then took a cautious bite. Her expression shifted, surprise then relief. "Good?" Joran asked. She nodded. "Different. But warm." He helped her drink, watching closely for signs of pain. When her breathing steadied slightly, he applied the thermal patch along her side where the bioluminescent markings were weakest. The glow responded almost immediately, stabilizing into a softer, steadier rhythm. Joran let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "There," he murmured. "That should help." Louise studied his hands as he worked, scarred, rough, human. "Why do you help me?" she asked again, more clearly this time. Joran leaned back against the wall, staring at the cracked ceiling of the tunnel. The question hung between them, heavy and unavoidable. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe because I know what it's like to be left behind." She tilted her head. "You were lost." He smiled faintly. "Still am." Outside the tunnel, The storm continued to rage, but something subtle had changed. The thunder no longer struck randomly. The lightning bent around the tunnel's entrance, carving paths through the sky that avoided it entirely. High above, unseen by either of them, royal sensors tracked the anomaly. In the observation chamber, the king stood unmoving. The storm's energy patterns twisted like living threads around the human and the child, responding not to command, but to presence. Interesting, the king murmured. Below, unaware of divine attention, Joran helped Louise to her feet. We can't stay here. There's a shelter city about 2 kilometers east. Crown patrols will be thick once the storm ends, but it's our best shot. Louise hesitated. If they find me, you will be punished. Joran met her gaze. Probably. She stared at him for a long moment, then reached out and took his hand. Her grip was warm now, steady. Then I will walk, she said. They moved together through the tunnel, emerging hours later into a battered dawn. The storm had passed, leaving the land scarred and steaming. The sky glowed pale gold, deceptively peaceful. Joran shielded his eyes. We're not safe yet. Louise nodded. I know. As they walked toward the distant shelter domes, Joran felt the weight of her presence beside him. Not heavy, not burdensome, but significant. Like carrying a truth too large to ignore. Above them, in the thinning clouds, a final bolt of lightning traced a symbol older than language. A sign of judgment deferred. The king continued to watch. And the test was not yet finished. The shelter city of Keeler, 9 looked peaceful from a distance. Smooth domes of reinforced glass and alloy rising from the scorched land like bubbles frozen in time. Steam curled upward from the ground, and emergency beacons blinked steadily, guiding survivors home after the storm. Joran Val knew better. Shelters attracted 2 things, desperate people, and the crown. He slowed his pace as they approached the outer gate, scanning the perimeter with a practiced eye. Security drones hovered above, their lenses sweeping in silent arcs. Armed sentinels stood at intervals, polished and perfect, untouched by the storm that had nearly killed him. Louise walked beside him, her steps steady now, her silver skin faintly glowing beneath his oversized coat. To anyone else, she might pass as a modified off-world child, but Joran could feel it. A quiet pressure in the air around her, like gravity slightly stronger than it should be. They're here, Joran muttered. Louise squeezed his hand. They always are. Before he could ask what she meant, a sharp tone cut through the morning air. Stop where you are. Joran turned slowly. 3 crowned sentinels approached, weapons lowered but ready. Their visors reflected the 2 of them back, one exhausted scrap runner and one small, glowing secret. Identification, the lead sentinel demanded. Joran raised his hands slightly. Name's Joran Val. Independent salvager. Storm survivor. The sentinel's gaze shifted to Louise. The child. She's with me, Joran said firmly. Step aside. Joran didn't move. Behind the visors, something changed. A signal passed between the sentinels, silent, instant. Weapons rose. Louise stepped forward. Please, she said softly. Do not hurt him. The sentinels froze. Their weapons trembled, not from malfunction, but from resistance. Systems flickered. Targeting reticles failed to lock. Joran stared. Louise, what did you just do? She looked up at him, eyes luminous with something like sorrow. I am sorry you had to see this. The air shifted. Light gathered behind the sentinels, folding inward on itself like a curtain being drawn back. People screamed and ran as the space itself seemed to open. From within the light stepped a figure tall and radiant, cloaked in living gold and starlight. The crown's sigil burned into the ground at his feet. Every sentinel dropped to one knee instantly. Joran's blood ran cold. The king, someone whispered. The figure's gaze settled on Joran. Not cold, not cruel, but impossibly deep. So, the king said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the square. You are the one who carried her through the storm. Joran swallowed, instinctively stepping in front of Louise again. His legs shook, but his voice held. She's a child, he said. If you're here to take her, you'll have to go through me. A murmur rippled through the crowd. No one spoke to the king that way and lived. The king regarded Joran for a long moment. Then slowly he raised a hand. The sentinels lowered their weapons. You were afraid, the king said. You knew the law. You knew the cost. Joran nodded once. Didn't matter. Why? Joran hesitated. Images flashed through his mind. Cold nights, empty hands, a galaxy that never stopped to care. Because leaving her would have been easier, he said quietly. And I'm tired of being the kind of man who chooses easy. Silence fell. Louise stepped beside him, taking his hand openly now. He is my guardian, she said. By choice. Not command. The king's expression changed then. Not surprise, but something close to relief. Slowly, deliberately he lowered himself. The king of the celestial throne knelt. Gasps echoed through the shelter city. Sentinels stared in disbelief. You have passed the storm's trial, the king said, bowing his head to Joran. Not of strength. Not of loyalty. But of mercy. Joran's mind reeled. Trial. The storm was never meant to kill her, the king continued. It was meant to reveal those who would help her, without knowing who she was. He turned his gaze to Louise. Last daughter of the Ilari. Heir of a lost people. Joran looked down at her, stunned. Louise? She nodded, eyes shining. I wanted to be normal. Just once. The king rose. Because of this man you were. He faced the crowd. Hear me. The Ilari are not extinct. Their future stands here, protected not by armies, but by a human who chose compassion over fear. He looked back at Joran. From this day forward, you are under my protection. No law shall touch you. No crown shall hunt you. Joran let out a shaky breath. I didn't do it for rewards. I know, the king said. That is why you deserve one. Light surged briefly, warm and gentle. The sentinels stood down. The threat was gone. Louise leaned against Joran, suddenly just a tired child again. You carried me, she whispered. Even when the storm watched. Joran wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Guess it was watching the wrong person. Above them, the sky cleared fully for the first time in years. And across the galaxy, stories would spread. Not of a king's power, but of a man who carried an orphan through a storm, not knowing a king was watching, and changed the fate of worlds by refusing to walk away. Milky Way sparkles.